First story today from the 28th of May, 2013. I discovered a flower in the garden. I never tended the garden, though I suppose I gave it space to grow. I walked through it sometimes, between the stone walls, the ivy, and the vine, statues placed there by ancestors I never knew. I know nothing of flowers, though I might claim some small knowledge of herbs, spices, and poisons. But I grew nothing of my own and acquired what I needed from various shops, some better hidden, some better disguised than others. Once I dreamt of a woman in the garden. She wore a little black dress and dangled her heels from her fingers as she walked barefoot amid the blooms. The flowers had been as large as the sun, unfolding over each other, dripping from the stone walls. But I'd had that dream when I was young, a lifetime ago, a long time ago. The flower surprised me. I hadn't been looking for it, merely wandering aimlessly, allowing my mind free rein over its thoughts, the virtues and drawbacks of common economic theory, the vastness of space and of time, the fact that every cell in our body has been completely eradicated every 7 years, and we are merely clones of ourselves. I met a witch once. She promised nothing, foresaw nothing, found nothing, and left me only with one sentence: tend to your garden, or it will tend to you. Again, that was long ago and in a faraway land. She'd spoken with an accent I can no longer describe. I sat beside the flower. Though I did not obstruct its sunlight, the stem seemed so thin, the petals so fragile. I'd always believed the witch to be speaking in metaphor. I wondered now if she had in fact been firmly rooted in reality. The petals were wide, red like a rose, though it was something different, something I couldn't identify. Dew still clung to it so early in the morning. I had begun my aimless wanderings by the light of the moon. The moon was gone now, safely away for the day, so I looked up toward the sun, squinting and averting my eyes, but not disguising my intent. "Is this supposed to mean something?" I asked. "Am I supposed to be spurred to action?" The sun did not answer. I wound my way back through my labyrinthine garden to the house, where I filled a pitcher of water. It was my garden, and had always been my garden. I found my way back to the flower with ease and gently gave it water. I said to the flower, "You are welcome to stay or to go. I have no requirements of you." The flower seemed to drink. At least the soil absorbed the water greedily. I couldn't remember the last rain, and I don't know when the forecast might call for some. "If you are here tomorrow," I said to the flower, "I will bring you more water." The next day, just after dawn, I returned to the red flower and found it was not alone. There was a blue flower of similar shape and a stalk of tiny white buds nearby. The sun shined down obliviously. I gave the flowers water, all three, and though I briefly considered doing so, I refrained from naming the flowers. That evening, as I slept, I dreamt of poetry, the words and images moving with the tide, fields of strangers, and the winds carrying words here and there. The next morning, there were a dozen flowers with the red one, all different, some bigger, some growing in clusters. I wonder what food they might want, but they seemed happy enough with my water and the sunlight. There were also, in other places in the garden, rogue flowers testing new locations, hiding behind the statues of mythical creatures, climbing the stone walls. I spent most of the day walking through the garden, giving water to the flowers and thanking them for visiting. When twilight came, I fell asleep within the garden. It must have been midnight when I woke. And when I did wake, I found myself surrounded by enormous white night blossoms, bluebells hanging from the tops of stone walls, flowers even in the stone hands of statues that were old before I was born. "There's no way I can keep up," I admitted. "I appreciate your coming and I welcome you all, but I haven't got time or strength enough to water you all." That didn't stop them. The next day there were more flowers, and more still the day after that. I returned to the first red flower and sat and thanked her for coming. "It's all quite lovely," I admitted, "but my bones are old and brittle and tired. I can't keep bringing you water." The next day it rained steadily for a dozen hours straight. Even then I walked through the garden, more and more amazed. That night, under the light of the full moon, I saw a woman in a little black dress, carrying her shoes as she walked barefoot among the blooms. She paused at one of the stone walls, looked back at me and smiled, then disappeared around the next corner. I'd seen the moonlight in her eyes. Now, if you find this note, but not me, I've gone into my labyrinthine garden, chasing a will-o'-the-wisp in a little black dress, and despite everything else, I regret nothing. Right, the next story that I'm going to read to you is from the 1st of June, 2015. The trick, the magician admitted to the kid, is to always have something up your sleeve, but to always say you don't. The kid smiled. You're not wearing sleeves. While effectively correct, the kid was wrong. The magician's sleeves were short, yes, not even halfway to his elbow, but they were sleeves. It should also be noted the magician had nothing up his sleeves. The trick, the magician admitted, is to always expect the unexpected. The kid smiled again. He was getting good at it. But if you expect it, it's not really unexpected, is it? Hey, it's just a paradox, the magician said. You have to get used to them as a magician. They're absolutely everywhere. This time the kid nodded, and the magician felt a great sense of relief. Now, he said, picking up a deck of cards, let me show you a trick. The kid smiled and said, No. I know all the card tricks, the kid said. I can levitate the aces, find the jack of spades anytime I want it, shake the pips off to one side. The magician flipped the first card, a 7 of diamonds, and handed it to the kid. Shake the pips, he said. The kid flipped the card once, twice, revealed the 7 of spades, a third and fourth time revealed the jack of spades, then twice more to show the original 7 with all its diamonds in a pile at the bottom. Quite a trick, the magician admitted. The kid handed back the card, it was normal now, and said, Show me something I haven't seen. Sure, the magician said, picking up instead a silver dollar. No, the kid said. No. I know all the coin tricks. I can call heads or tails without ever missing. I can bend the coin with my thumb. I can release the eagle on the back. The magician examined the coin. There is no eagle on this one, he said. It's 1976, Liberty Bell. The kid held out his hand. The magician dropped the coin into his palm. The kid flipped it in the air, called it tails, caught it, and slapped it down on the back of his forearm. The eagle, tails, showed. The kid flipped it again and handed it back. Liberty Bell. Quite a trick, the magician admitted. I know all the rope tricks, too, the kid said. I can cut rope and tie rope and make a lasso to catch keys and butterflies. Quite a trick, the magician admitted. He'd never heard of using rope to capture butterflies. And I know all the rabbit tricks, the kid said, with the hats and the carrots and the lucky feet and the stew. The kid meant to continue, but the magician stopped him. How about a disappearing trick? I can make handkerchiefs disappear, the kid said, as well as coins, watches, and wallets. The magician fished a sheet out of his bag of tricks. Help me with this one, the magician said. It's bigger than a rabbit. He tossed the sheet over the kid. Underneath, he could hear the kid smiling. The magician counted 3, 2, 1, then he yanked away the sheet, and the kid was gone. The magician started whistling quietly to himself as he packed up his bag of tricks for the next show. Third story today is going to be from the 21st of May, 2017. I finally got my own ghost, second hand off of eBay. The fad had pretty much run its course. All the cool kids had gotten theirs and already discarded them. I knew the risks going in, especially when you buy such a thing online. There's no guarantee of quality. It might be a cheap knockoff and only good for 2 or 3 visitations before it started to fade. It might be a fake entirely, a quasi-intelligent hologram programmed on another continent. I couldn't even get its verbs right. And even on Amazon, an ad proclaiming it to be genuine Nintendo or General Electric may easily be a lie. On eBay, the likelihood of shysters and frauds grew exponentially. So I vetted the seller, verified their rating, even arranged an interview of sorts with a dissatisfied customer. Their dissatisfaction was based on speed of delivery, not quality of the product. They'd gotten exactly what I wanted, a genuine Layli, a hinged doll from Iran, with a legitimate spectral presence attached. They'd attached ghosts to Barbie dolls too, but those don't appeal to me. I paid good money for the doll and its ghost. The seller communicated with me throughout. I paid extra for overnight delivery. It still took 6 days for the seller to package and otherwise prepare the shipment. He insisted such things could not be rushed. I'd also read all sorts of rumors on the internet. If I'd had a less inquisitive mind, I probably would have believed the same stupid stories. But I was patient. The doll arrived after lunch. And I was immediately disappointed in the story of the ghost's original caretaker, a girl named Soraya, who had decided on a Tuesday to sell the ghost. No real story, no explanation. That was part of what I'd been buying. I set that folded paper aside and opened the note about the ghost itself, whom they called Lily. Again, the story was scant. It merely said she was believed to have been poisoned in the 1970s. Then I opened the box to release the doll. It was beautiful, fragile, old, everything I could have hoped for. I would put her at the center of my mantle. Then I invoked the ghost, carefully following the instructions I had found online, but it wasn't Liling who appeared. It was Veronica Lake. She looked at me and sighed and said, "Do we have to go through all this again?" I don't know why, but for some reason there was a time where I included the ghost, or at least referenced the ghost of Veronica Lake in like a dozen different places. Um, I don't know what happens. I guess I get stuck on a thing or on a person, and there it goes. All right, so I do have another three stories to read today. If you are interested, I will start with the next one. Is going to be from the 2nd of June, 2013. Before I begin, I should tell you that I did at some point decide names might be too much of a thing to do for a project like this, where ultimately I was going to be writing over 300 stories every year. I ended up writing over 1,000 between the 3 years. So a lot of times I went with the default names of Jack and Jill. There wasn't always a hill for them to go up or anything like that, but Jack and Jill, or variations thereof. So this story has variations thereof, from the 2nd of June, 2013. Jillian loved Jacques with all her heart and all her soul, and Jacques loved Jillian equally. So they etched their names onto an old padlock, attached it to the fence on a bridge in Paris, and tossed the key into the Seine. The river took their key, just as it had taken hundreds, even thousands of keys from lovers young and old, new and experienced, fresh and stale alike. The key drifted through the water until it reached the bed of keys at the bottom. Jillian and Jacques went home to their third-story walk-up apartment. They had a dinner of cheese and bread and wine with chocolate for dessert, and made love through the night till the sun peeked over the edge of Paris. Some promises are not easily broken. Their lock had been a joint work of art, and when they locked it to that fence, it was witnessed by slippery, otherworldly beings, fairies no more than 8 to 10 inches high, with long, supple limbs and butterfly wings. There were two, a mated pair, hanging on a post above the bridge, close enough to hear the promise of Jillian and Jacques' lips and the vow in their hearts. The world can be a cruel place, but the fairies decided to enforce the lovers' promise. They worked to divert temptation. They left the lovers gifts of chocolate and coins and little jewels, anything to bring ease and comfort to their lives. Jillian was the singer in a jazz band. Jacques was an artist. Temptation was constant in their world, always present and available. But the fairies made it so the available temptations didn't fling themselves at the lovers. They congratulated themselves on a job well done. When, a year later, Jillian and Jacques returned to their fence on their bridge, their padlock was gone, as were others, though more had come to take their place. The fairies were furious. Who dared interfere in a lover's pact? Jillian and Jacques, saddened and distressed, returned alone to their apartment. They ate no dinner, and though they slept beside each other, they slept alone. The fairies returned to the bridge. They watched the fence. They watched other lovers make feeble promises with half the energy. That night, the rain began promptly at midnight and continued past dawn. The fairies took to guarding the padlocks. A boy came one morning with bolt cutters and attempted to open the lock he and his lover had left a month earlier. A girl came one night, clung to her lock, hung from it, leaning against the fence, and wept. Death had claimed her lover. One morning, a man in a uniform arrived, carrying bolt cutters of an industrial strength. He started cutting the padlocks, not all of them, maybe 1 in 3, seemingly at random. They came away easily, most of them, and he threw them unceremoniously into a cardboard box in the back of his truck. Boldly, one of the fairies presented itself and announced, "I cannot allow you to continue." He'd already cut away almost a dozen, but he was far from done. He paused, wiped his brow, and said to the fairy, "Why not? I'm just doing my job." "Have you no shame?" the fairy asked. "No respect for the promises made here?" The worker smiled. I'm only cutting away the locks. You're shattering sacred vows. The worker laughed. Breaking the lock is not the same as breaking a vow. Don't you know that? It's a symbol. Symbols have strength, the fairy said. The worker nodded. But you can't break a lover's vow by cutting open a lock. It must be unlocked, not broken. He shook his head. I would have expected you to know that. The fairy, ashamed of his ignorance, hung his head. Still, he said, it's a sad thing. It is even sadder, the worker said, to come and find no place to affix your own promise. That's why I make room for tomorrow's lovers. That brought tears to the fairy's eyes. But what becomes of the padlocks? Are they thrown away without a second thought? Some, the worker said, but some, I believe, are works of art. I keep them. The fairies that night went to the worker's home and viewed his collection. Some were fantastic, some were simple. The characters of other writing systems filled some. There were painted hearts and illustrated lips and moons, rainbows, stars, flowers, seahorses, and then they found Jillian and Jock's etched padlock. We must take this one, the fairy said. The worker nodded. You didn't resist inevitability. The fairies then went swimming and returned a particular key from the bottom of the Seine. The bar of the lock had been twisted and snapped. There was a hole, but the mechanism remained in place. The lock was locked. The key, after over a year at the bottom of the river, still fit and would turn, would open the lock and shatter the promise, but the fairies didn't turn it. They returned to Jillian and Jacques' third-story walk-up apartment before dawn one morning and left both the key and the lock on their kitchen table. When Jillian found it, she cried. It's like the universe is giving us a chance to unseal our vow, she said. Or, Jacques suggested, to reaffirm it. That day, they brought the lock to a metalworker and had him weld the locking mechanism so it couldn't be turned, and weld the key, now useless, into the lock. When they brought the lock home, they hung it with its snapped and twisted bar on the wall. They had a dinner of cheese, bread, and wine, with chocolate for dessert, and they made love till the sun peeked over the edge of Paris. Next story I'm going to read today from the 4th of June, 2015. There's a legend. Of course there is. There always is. You get any old house abandoned for any amount of time, there's bound to be a legend. Murder, generally, sometimes suicide. It always leads to restless spirits. This particular legend references the cellar, which is not all that unusual. Cellars are dark. A lot like attics, they're not the most commonly used rooms of a house. Home to spiders and shadows and, when abandoned, mice and rats and other critters. And there's hardly any natural light, so bring a flashlight and good batteries. Because there's a legend. The batteries will not hold much of a charge. The beam will flicker a few times before it goes out. How do you trust your eyes with those kinds of constraints? After images and pseudo-shapes filtered through strong imaginations merely feed the legends. In this sense, the ghost of a jilted bride lingers in the cellar. Why would a jilted bride still have on her wedding gown? How did she even die? Why is she in the cellar? Legends are frightfully thin on details. Ghostly brides, always add a touch of melodrama, don't you think? Wedding nights are favorites for violence, at least according to legend. An internet search would be unreliable, as legends are repeated as facts reported by reputable news outlets expounded upon in blogs. The ghost of a jilted bride haunts the cellar. It's really just an average basement, isn't it? Of a typical unlived-in house on a standard suburban road. Am I going to buy into it? The house is identical to another dozen on the block. The subdivision's not even that old. If there'd ever been violence, someone would remember it. Someone other than the friend of a friend who heard it from his cousin. Seriously, was the cousin drunk when he told this tale? So I go with the realtor into the house, and we even go into the basement, cellar, whatever. I ask about the legend. She giggles and says kids will be kids. Hurries me back upstairs. The owners have marked the place down, not because of legends, because of market conditions, because they're motivated, because they've already purchased a new place down in Florida. We draw up paperwork and I make an offer. I'm not worried about legends. Anyway, she seemed so very happy to see me. All right, one more story for today. This one's from the 29th of May, 2017. They tell stories around these parts, don't you forget it. And every story they tell has got at least a toe in the real world and in something that honestly happened. Sure, they change the names to protect their friends. You do the same. What I'm saying is don't trust them, but don't ignore them either. Not unless you want to go get yourself killed or something. So I'm going to tell you something of the story. You don't have to believe a word of it, but it's a warning that much is guaranteed truth. Don't trust the storyteller. Listen, he'll tell you. Gather around. He has his secrets to tell, his tales to trade, maybe for a bottle of water, maybe whiskey, maybe a pack of baseball cards. I don't know always what he wants. You know what I want. That's not the same thing. Anyway, there was this night not long ago. A stranger walks into the diner for a meal, has got himself a room at the Thunderbird on Route 9. Not looking for trouble, not looking for a woman or drugs or a fight, and certainly not looking for a story. Yet in walks the storyteller, out of the cold, rubbing his hands together and blowing on them, shaking a bit of snow off his coat. Takes in the whole diner with a single glance because he doesn't really need to see anything but what's different. And what's different is the stranger, right there at the counter, waiting on a plate of pastrami. So the storyteller steps up and takes a seat next to him and orders corned beef and a glass of milk before turning to the stranger and saying, "Headed north, are you?" The stranger grunts or nods or says yes, and Annie brings out his food, and it's really not much of a conversation opener, but that don't stop the storyteller. He shoots out another question, though he doesn't ask it. "I bet you're staying at the Thunderbird." The stranger nods or grunts again. He's got food in his mouth, he can't do much more. And so the storyteller, he does what he does. He tells the stranger a story. One that involves love and betrayal and poison and a snowy night right here at the Thunderbird. And I'll be damned if he didn't include a vengeful ghost in his telling of it. I tell the same story sometimes. Ain't no ghost. When the stranger leaves the diner, he leaves Annie a nice tip, nothing too exorbitant, and he gets in his Mustang and heads up Route 9 to the Thunderbird. And that's it. No one ever sees him again. Not Annie at the diner, not Gwen at the Thunderbird, not me. His Mustang's still there in the parking lot, outside room 6. No one knows who should move it. Damn thing's covered with snow. And the storyteller, we won't see him again until he's hungry.